to thank the many people who began work on digital classics and digital humanities, many of which I've been personally inspired by, and I hope we can all move from this first engagement forward in promoting classics and digital humanities within classics and academia at large. To begin, are there ways digital humanities and digital classics can harness technology for research, teaching, and outreach to non-academic communities all at the same time? And is it our task to do so? I would argue, yes, it is, and I've embarked on what I hope is an example of one such project that seeks to bridge a common and traditionally offered course on many campuses, classical mythology, with the contemporary and modern world. In this presentation, I will introduce you to the basic functionalities of mapping mythology and discuss some of the ways it can be used by scholars for research, its pedagogical applications and utility in the classroom, and its potential importance for non-academic audiences. Reception of this type of material culture has an immediacy in the built environment, especially in large urban landscapes across the Western world. Here you see two well-known examples in New York City, the Transportation Sculptural Group of Grand Central Terminal and Atlas in Rockefeller Plaza. Before I show the main functionalities of the site, I'd like to briefly describe the origin of this project and how that affected the design and layout of the database that I ended up choosing to develop. And part of that is both so you can see how it's affected the website I created, but also in terms of ways of reduplicating how we get graduate students involved in digital projects. While many in the classroom focus on text and universal archetypes and theoretical approaches to mythology, I also wanted to demonstrate to my students how these texts have also had an outsized role in later artistic production, both textual and pictorial. Thus, I gathered a few images of paintings and sculptural groups of mythic scenes and mythic deities and presented them to my class. With a focus on iconography and identification of the deities or mythic creatures, my students were able to appreciate myth in several formats and its lasting legacy. The need to collect and organize my pictures led to a new idea of creating something like the current site I had built to house and curate those images in a narrative that would afford both quick reference on information, either a myth or a god, and also unique insights into made more possible by digital technology. A friend of mine at the Graduate Center told me about a unique program there, the Interactive Technology and Pedagogy Program, the ITP for short. And it's designed to get graduate students involved and learn about ways of incorporating tech in the classroom, and also it's a bridge and it's become a locus of digital humanities at the Graduate Center. Through those courses, I was led into a deeper understanding of digital humanities and scholarship, the theoretical models that are emerging from and surrounding it, and also it afforded me access to a host of other scholars in different disciplines, so I could see what they're doing in DH as well, and it really bridges home a sort of nexus of DH, not just classics, not just English or history, but everyone together and the sciences and social sciences. As part of the requirements for this certificate, I began to the building phase of this project, and I chose Omeka as my platform for the database. After gathering and curating enough data, I decided to introduce the site back into the classroom environment and to study and assess how the site, now as a pedagogical tool, might change the learning outcomes I had always sought to achieve. At the same time, the site has already yielded original research, and at the moment, I could only foresee more of that happening as the site increases, the number of data sets are increasingly added to. As far as where the project currently stands, the main aim remains to have a definitive resource that gathers all the instances of classical mythology and post-antique art, be it public sculpture, architectural sculpture, or relief, or painting. The main phase of this long-term project is nearly complete and gathering data from New York City, and the plan is to feature another U.S. city before going on to an international one. These types of projects, of course, only grow fast with crowdsourcing, and currently contributions are always welcome. I'd now like to move to show you the website. You can see here some of the basic features. One thing Omeka that, if you're not familiar with it already, they have very poor theming, so unless you are a good themer, you are sort of left with the basics that they give you. But even with that, you can it's good for my project. Some of the basic tenets here, you can see on the title page, you can browse by item, collection, or exhibit. For me, items refer to individual artworks. In collections, they are curated around medium, so in my case, public sculpture, architectural sculpture, relief, and painting. And then exhibits is really the meat of the project, and that's where specific artworks, either usually grouped around location and medium, are given a narrative form, right, and placed in a larger context and discussed in that way. If we click on Browse Items, you can see the total number of public items, and for some of them where I have added it, there's descriptions along with the picture and the title of the artwork. If we click on one to see an example of what comes up, you can see the title, and Omeka has built-in Dublin Core metadata standards. So Omeka was originally designed a lot for a librarian, so it has all of this great metadata just caked right in. So it's very easy to adapt it for whatever you're doing. In my case, pictures, but you could also upload files, PDFs, whatever it is. Descriptions, creator date, and other things like that. For this case in painting, the metadata about its oil on canvas and the dimensions. If you click on the picture, you can see zoom in and things like that. So for specific iconography, right, you can, students and people engaging with this can see that. Okay, go back. Just quick, oh wait, that's not the back button. Sorry, it's hard to see here. Collections, just to show you briefly, right, how that looks. Very easy to navigate: sculpture, painting, architecture. There's some other items I would like to show you just so you can see the how I deal with the different mediums. If we go to the last page, which is one of the first things I've done, the Temperance Fountain in New York City. You'll see with the painting, right, I didn't geotag it because it's at the museum, right? It's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I'm not going to be geotagging things there because it's going to be already easy to find in the collections. But for things like this, public sculpture, I first provide other links. So most of the sculpture in New York is maintained by the Parks Department, liable to budgets and all sorts of things. So I have, if their website is up, you can see the data they have there. And then here as well, right, I will put it on the map so you can see in its context in the East Village and do all of that fun stuff. You can also browse by map at the top. If we go back to the search function, and here you'll see a map where all of the pinpoints that I have I've labeled are, you can see them all on one single map, which is really useful, and it's something that eventually I'm going to put on the main page as I develop the site more. But even here you can already see a basic clustering around 5th Avenue in the Midtown area, which is part of the information I want to get at with these large data sets. Just to quickly show you the search function, if we test Athena, you'll see I have 4 monuments tagged with Athena, and in order, always thinking of the user end, everything is double tagged. So if we search Minerva, the same 4 monuments come up. So again, dealing with students, undergraduates, and the general population I want to connect to, we always have to sort of think broadly. So if you take a little effort early on to double tag things with Minerva, Athena, and all the different gods, the Greco and also Roman names, you get a better result for the user. If I could just mention briefly with the map, it's still sort of developing at this point, but eventually I'm going to have the map and also a timeline overlaid over that. So you'll be able to search the map and the timeline at the same time and be able to zoom in on either specific times or places and see based on if you want to just search Athena or just search sculpture, and you'll be able to traverse the time in history and see where those clusterings occur in medium and in space and in time. And that's sort of the goal in terms of my own research and how I envision people using it. Browse exhibits, which as I said earlier is a large part of the meat of the project. And actually here I'm going to switch to the back end, which I've logged into now, because part of this is not public yet. If you look at Manhattan, you can see here an example of how things are curated. Here, this is the Bell Ringer Monument, right, in 34th Street. And you can see exhibits, I show a subset of artworks, usually around a medium, in a specific location and curated and placed in a narrative structure. So here, text. The main points described in the narrative are the art historical information, iconographical attributes, and links to Perseus and other primary source information down below, where readers then, again, seeing in mind whether it's undergraduates, they want to learn more about this, it may not be a text I'm having them read, they can go in and see and read that text and learn about Athena in this case, or whatever other deity or the scene, the mythic scene that's being portrayed in the sculpture. Okay, you can see also here, wherever possible, I found historical photos, because many of these monuments, especially the public sculpture, don't remain in situ their whole life, and as cities develop and history goes on, they move. So in this case, the monument here, and again, clicking on any photo brings you back to the metadata item. You can see the original monument was actually on the top of the Herald building. This was the Herald Tribune. And their print shops are right here, and you can go and see the printing press every night as they were pumping out the paper. So roughly the monument now stands around here, and then as the building was torn down, the paper collapsed. So you can see that's a really sort of helpful tool. You can sort of gather all those images together and sort of create a real history around each art object. Okay, so that's it for now for the site. So who and what? Now that I've shown you the website, I'd like to briefly discuss the potential scholarship and research for classicists using mapping mythology. Who will use the database and what will they use it for? To answer the who question first, I anticipate classicists interested in mythology and its reception in visual media will find the site immensely useful for gathering examples, especially as the data sets increase over time. Furthermore, classicists researching classics in America will benefit from the inclusion of material culture. In addition, art historians will especially find the public sculpture and painting sections relevant as a repository of art images of mythology, and those doing research for the narrative sculpture found in the exhibit sections, which anyone will be able to contribute to eventually. So as the site grows, it's not open yet, but people, users will be able to create profiles, right, and they can go in and contribute, and everything will be attributed to what they write, the photos they upload, so all of that is taken care of. Additionally, architectural historians and urban historians will find the architectural sculpture and relief of interest, especially those historians who research the interconnections between architectural patronage and U.S. economic output. To move on to the second question, what would these scholars use the site for? I envision several core uses around which the site was developed to facilitate, and also a few ancillary ones, but by no means are they insignificant. Core uses include traditional mythology reception research. For example, what was done a few years ago with an edited volume on the reception of Hercules in literature. A similar project could be done for either a particular myth, a plot moment, a deity, or even an artist across various visual media represented on the site. More of interest for me in what large datasets might reveal about mythology art production in specific locations and during specific time periods. For example, the data I've collected so far for New York City, as I showed you a minute ago, is starting to reveal a clustering around Fifth Avenue and the Midtown sections of Manhattan in particular, which, if you're familiar with late 19th and early 20th centuries, was known as Millionaire's Row, because all of the robber barons built their mansions right on Fifth Avenue. So a lot of that architecture remains, and a lot of the sculpture from that is reused in other ways, and so you really sort of start to see, a nexus they are forming, and that's the research I'm interested in. Moving on to the classroom, this database, as I said, I've also used it and pulled it back into my classroom, both in undergraduate, but also I envision it being able to use in high schools as well. The site is free, open source, so even cash-strapped institutions need not pay for large yearly contracts. Right, this is the stuff we love about DH. Second, the database's robust search function increases the utility for novice students and the casual visitor. So if you want to just search Athena, as I showed, or Minerva, however you know of that deity, right, you can do so, or you can search by artist as well. Furthering the ease of use, right, images are the result, not text. Right, as you saw when I showed you the various items, images are forefront, right, because I'm dealing with artistic production. So while the description is there, I really want people to focus in on the visual. As I mentioned earlier, part of the genesis of this project was the desire to have a resource for students in my mythology classes to reference throughout the semester. Indeed, that such a specific database of mythology and post-antique art did not already exist, while many did for myth and ancient art forms. I was doubly motivated to get started on something like this, so not only I could have it in my own class, but others, other mythology teachers interested in showing these types of myth reception could do so as well. As I mentioned earlier, I chose New York City both because of the large enough data sets I could curate, and I'm there, so it's easy to gather it. But also because of the potential it afforded for my students to engage in their own process of discovery. Because I emphasize myth reception in literature and in art, and in my learning outcomes, I have shown pictures of myth and art for several semesters. And students have continually asked for a repository of images. Any art history teacher always faces this. They always want the images. They want to go and see them again and again outside of the class. So I set out to make my project reception of myth and art not just an add-on, but an integral part of the course. Further, if students could review an image later, they could legitimately focus on classroom discussion and not take notes on the art piece, right? Because they can see it again later. In just the last 2 years, I have assigned an end-of-semester project where each student must engage with public art in New York City, inspired by mythology, some of which are on the website, some of which I've deliberately kept off so they can, again, embark on that process of discovery. And across all the different, the 3 media that I have on the site. The objective is to create a situation where students are engaging with mythic art and material culture in their own urban environment that directly links to the stories read and discussed in class, and to have students reflect upon that connection. Based on 2 years of assessment studies I've done from this project, students find the connections of mythic stories in class and their reception in art both beneficial and for providing new angles of interpreting the story, and also engaging with public art in its own right as an activity that for them really brings the myth to life, right? Because they can go and see, a statue of Athena that's monumental in size, right? And it's sort of always have a wow moment. For the students that I've, again, in the studies, I've had a very positive, nearly 80% of the students, and in classes of around 55, that's pretty much everyone, really gives me good feedback on this, and I've tailored that into how I use it in the class and also how I envision developing the site further. This leads to my final point about the potential for digital humanities projects and their ability to reach out to larger academic and non-academic communities. I mentioned a moment ago the potential use of such databases of material culture in high school, as well as undergraduate institutions. Many of my students are not being exposed to mythology for the first time in my class. This database will become a valuable resource for high school Latin and mythology teachers looking to enrich their students' understanding of mythology and its influence on modern history. An added and particular important benefit is the possibility of communities and students not located in large urban environments with rich material culture to virtually visit places like New York City and other cities dense with neoclassical architecture and public art forms. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, projects like this provide an important point of advocacy for classics' continued relevance in the contemporary world, contemporary academic life, and civic life. The project is quite even multidisciplinary, crossing classics, art history, urban studies, U.S. history, architecture, just to name a few. And this thereby provides a renewed presence for classics on campuses, in schools, and in our communities. The project also becomes an ambassador for engaging with the general public in terms of the history around them, classics' influence in America and on American identities, and for places like New York City, the importance of landmark preservation to ensure the character of these monuments are not lost for future generations. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the ITP program and New Media Lab, which have been substantial in helping me create this project, as well as an initial grant funding that I received, which allowed me to hire 2 research assistants to pound the pavement, walk the city block by block, and look at the buildings. Thank you.